This is a special presentation of Money, Power, and Politics.
The VA says yes.
Right.
But the VA says no.
Right. They knew all the way back then, they just chose to ignore.
How could they if you yourself ignored it?
Well, that's where somebody should have done their homework.
I don't know how anyone that knows that this happened to someone can just go to sleep at night and be okay with it.
Our government failed the men and women who fought for it. The President, Congress, and VA have ordered change, but a lot of veterans are still fighting and still suffering in our continuing investigation of forgotten heroes and the war at home.
While the VA says it has improved, Secretary David Shulkin has said it's still in critical condition, and many vets are still waiting for the benefits they've earned. So we'll start with those who die waiting and what they leave behind.
Sarasota National Cemetery is the final resting place for Charles Edward Williams. His journey on this earth ended as a loving husband and wounded veteran waiting for help that never came. He died in 2015 on a hot Monday in June.
And my air conditioning broke, so I went a whole summer without the air to keep from having such a large bill.
His widow, Morris Lee Williams, suffered that summer in ways that would surely tear him apart.
They said 110, and
110 degrees in your house.
110 in the house. Mm-hmm.
She could not afford to get the air fixed and could not afford the bills even if she did.
And it's hard to sleep at night when you're sweating and you have a fan on and it's still not doing any good for you.
Now Mrs. Williams spends much of her time in the dark to save on the light bill and anywhere else she can.
Sometimes I wouldn't buy food so we could...
You wouldn't buy food?
Yeah.
And she's still reeling in the kind of pain that only comes from pure grief.
Everything to me is gone because the love of my life is gone.
They married when she was 14.
This is him when he was younger.
The Army sent him off to Vietnam, where 2 years of blast dulled his hearing and a bomb ripped off part of his hand. And Agent Orange may have caused the cancer in his nose that eventually took his life.
They didn't give him anything. And he tried everything he could to get things, but they would never give him anything. Always the runaround.
He finally got approved for the benefits he said he needed for his war injuries just a couple of months before he died.
I'm gonna be all right. That's what he told me.
And so he begged his wife to keep fighting for back pay for all the years they missed.
He said, baby, I don't know what they're gonna do, but keep fighting to see if you can get something for the trouble that I'm going through. And that's what I've been trying to do.
She wonders if her husband may still be here, if they told her about the risk of Agent Orange years before. Maybe they could have screened him and found that cancer before it was too late.
It's not a day go by that I don't break down and cry because I'm so lonely and I miss him so much.
But she mostly wonders if she'll ever get the benefits he begged for as he said goodbye.
Sometimes it's hard for me to pay my light bill.
Tears from a widow in St. Pete and lip service from the politicians in Washington. They promised to do right by the men and women who served our country, while countless vets died waiting for them to deliver.
He's laying here, and I say, baby, I love you. And he said, I love you too. And that was the last thing he said. That's a disgrace. A disgrace. Nobody should have to suffer like that.
And while the VA tries to revamp its claim system, it's also grappling with another crisis that's killing around 20 veterans a day. And that brings us to perspective from ailing vets that could save lives.
Billy Onses was known for being tough. He collapsed in a training accident, woke up from a coma, then shipped off to Iraq, where he earned 6 medals in war.
It was my life.
But the demons of war followed him home. He was depressed. His wife, Genevieve, watched as he fell to pieces.
He would lay down on the ground and just scream his head off.
And so he wrote letters to the VA, begging for help.
Almost 3 months before he got an appointment.
And Billy Onces got tired of waiting.
By the time I grabbed the phone, call 911, I'm getting by the front door and suddenly I hear bang.
He blamed the VA for giving him lip service in his suicide note.
I just fell to the ground. I just couldn't believe it.
Around 20 veterans take their own lives every day. Most are younger than 50. And Tony Jones knows what Billy Onces and many of them were going through because he's lived it.
I tried to jump off the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Tampa police stopped me. I tried to shoot myself. My wife stopped me. I parked on the train track. My wife stopped me.
Tony is a vet who says he's tried to take his own life at least 10 times. Doctors tied his depression and wounds to his legs and feet to his time in the service. He gets disability benefits now, but he's fighting for back pay for the years he had to wait to get approved.
They wait for me to die. They delaying it.
And when they send him form letters that don't explain things in a way he can understand,
you know how many papers come across their desk?
it just feeds the anger and depression.
Maybe that's probably why I'm angry, because nobody will sit down.
There's a reason why Tampa police were able to talk him down from that bridge.
I don't know, they just made me feel, I guess they had somebody who was compassionate and concerned. So it made me feel like my life maybe was worth living.
So guess what happens when he deals with a government bureaucracy and form letters from a department swamped in disability claims?
Depressed, balled up in the fetal position crying.
And it doesn't help when he appears to get the runaround.
For my mental condition.
That the regional office said you don't have.
Right. But I do have it.
So, as VA managers declare a suicide crisis and look for ways to get through to vets on the brink, they may want to heed the letters of Billy and reread the letters they sent to Tony.
We finally figured it out. The VA says yes.
Yes. In my competence, they say yes.
But the VA says no.
The regional office says no.
The VA says yes.
Right.
But the VA says no.
Right.
And give them the time and help they need to win the war within.
What makes me sad is just, I feel less than a damn man. I feel less than a man.
VA Secretary Shulkin ranks the suicide crisis as his top priority. And he's also rolled out plans to help speed up benefits appeals and medical visits. But it won't be easy because part of the problem goes back to how our vets are trained.
The Marines release these videos to show what it takes.
Not only are you going to be tired, you're going to be hungry.
To be hungry and vicious.
Left, right, left, right, left, right. Left, right, left, right, left, right.
No pain, no emotion. That's how they make tough fighters, but it also makes some of them very tough to care for when they come home.
You do not show pain, you do not show emotions, and you do not talk about it. And to do so is conduct on becoming a Marine.
James Carbone fought in Vietnam and has battled with depression and post-traumatic stress ever since.
I don't sleep at all. I'll go get an hour here, 2 hours here, a half an hour, 45-minute nap in the afternoon. That's my sleep.
How many years?
Since I come home.
He also trained in Camp Lejeune, where industrial solvents known to cause cancer tainted the drinking water.
Who knew? I mean, we took showers, we drank, wherever there was water needed, you just used the water.
Then in 2011, he came down with cancer and says he never once sought help from the VA as part of his code.
Absolutely. I did not receive a dime because I did not seek them. And that was because of my Marine Corps values.
So you're telling me that you have medical problems that you're not getting help for through the VA because you're not telling the VA that you need help?
Basically, yes. They knew all the way back then, they just chose to ignore.
How could they if you yourself ignored it?
Well, that's where somebody should have done their homework.
As frustrating as that may sound, it explains part of the crisis that politicians often miss when they rip the VA for a problem beyond its control.
Is James Carbone an isolated case?
James Carbone is one of a million different cases that are very similar.
Bobby Rollins runs a support group for ailing vets.
Of all the veterans you've worked with, how many fall in this category?
I'd say 90%.
90%?
90% of veterans. Needing benefits could be looked at as a sign of weakness to some people.
So he says many others like James just suffer in silence.
You keep your mouth shut. And I did for 40 years.
Well, it tells you that there's a huge problem.
And Rollins says it calls for more outreach and counseling and maybe a little more training from the military.
You go through basic training to prepare you for military life. You need to go through some type of process that prepare you to become a civilian again.
James Carbone finally decided to come forward, and he shared his story in hopes that it may inspire others to seek help before it's too late.
After 40 some odd years of being told to keep your mouth shut, you finally are understanding that to get help, you have to open up your mouth.
Coming up, warnings from a VA whistleblower who the VA tried to fire for eating a stale sandwich.
The sandwiches were expired just within a couple days.
Plus, the few, the proud, the poison.
I can't believe my government has done this to us.
When you meet the Boulay family,
got you.
The first thing you notice
Cleaning the bathroom
is how much they like to cut up and laugh.
Baked beans.
Ashley takes after her dad.
She's tough. She's a fighter like her dad.
Christian's the aspiring artist.
He's quiet, very, very quiet, shy.
Erica's the aspiring dancer.
She's got a great sense of humor. She's very spunky.
And Janice and Bob are just proud of their kids.
I love my kids. They mean everything to me.
And that's why they also break down in tears.
They're always there for me.
Because they say they've all been poisoned by our government.
If you do it to me, that's one thing. But now you're doing it to my family. That's a whole nother thing. You poisoned us, woefully.
Back in the 1980s, Bob Boulay trained with the Marines at Camp Lejeune, where the drinking water was toxic.
It was beyond words, beyond belief.
You could dry clean suits or clean metal with the solvents that leached into the wells.
I can't believe my government has done this to us.
Bob developed kidney and liver problems and a brain tumor. And like many other Marines and reservists, he finally got benefits for his time at Camp Lejeune. But his wife and kids didn't. And under the current rules, they can't.
It's not their fault. You know, they didn't deserve this. I signed up, they didn't.
Janice had miscarriages, which they believe were tied to the toxic water.
It's tough because my first miscarriage, I was 5 months pregnant when I lost that one.
Her son Christian developed neurological problems.
I was getting in the car with my father and I just broke down. I started crying and having basically a panic attack.
Ashley discovered she had spina bifida nearly 10 years ago when she was a freshman in high school.
It's like if someone had a knife and they just had it in your back and kept twisting.
And Erica, the aspiring dancer, just discovered she has it too.
I had to just sit there and I went blank. I didn't know what to think.
She couldn't even get out of bed. A 15-year-old shouldn't feel that way.
They had no family history of any of this, but they've tied it to a pattern of other ailing vets from Camp Lejeune. But the government will not approve benefits for family members who may have been affected.
The families need help too. But the families usually, they forget about them.
It's not that they forgot, they just won't connect the kids' problems to the water because they were born after Bob and Janice left the base. The government won't acknowledge that parents can pass contaminated or mutated genes from Camp Lejeune onto their kids.
It was a knife to the heart.
Well, the Boulays believe the water made all of them sick, and they're not alone.
It makes me angry that they can't get help.
Camp Lejeune veterans spent years fighting for their benefits, and many, like Bob Boulay, say they'll fight even harder for their kids.
I don't know how anyone that knows that this happened to someone can just go to sleep at night and be okay with it.
Government estimates show disability payments the VA has approved could cost more than $2 billion within 5 years. Meanwhile, the VA is still taking heat from whistleblowers who say they're still facing retaliation for speaking out.
Approximately 20% of the ER nurses would retaliate against me.
The saying, shoot the messenger, is probably alive and well in the VA system.
And the Office of Special Counsel continued to investigate claims of mismanagement and harassment against the veterans who reported. We usually hear their accounts through statements on Capitol Hill or from whistleblowers who won't show their faces on TV.
It seems that nothing's really gotten better.
But this vet wants us to show his face, even though he says he's still facing retaliation at work. I emailed Troy Thompson more than a year ago, and he just recently replied to say he's ready to talk.
You probably can find numerous people that have been just blackballed and run over and just kicked out of the ranks unjustifiably.
Thompson joined the Navy as a young man. Cooking was his specialty, and he served thousands of meals along the way, from ships to VA centers. He worked his way up to food service production chief in Philadelphia. And in 2012, he noticed sanitation problems, including insects and rodents in the kitchen.
We had areas that weren't being cleaned.
Investigators say his complaints were never investigated. But the day he reported them to his bosses, Troy Thompson was transferred from the kitchen to the morgue.
I'm a food service production chief, and they sent me to a lab area to process body parts and clean up urine and blood vials and dump biohazard materials.
And after months of scrubbing the morgue, the VA found a reason to fire him for something he had done in the kitchen.
After about several months, she brought me back down and issued me a proposed removal for eating those sandwiches.
That's right. They said he violated policy by eating a couple of sandwiches that were stale.
The sandwiches were expired just within a couple days, so it's not like they were moldy or things like that.
The sandwiches were worth a total of $5 before they expired. But by eating them, the VA nailed him for disregarding food labels and stealing government property in the form of stale sandwiches. The VA moved to fine him and fire him until he reported this to the Office of Special Counsel.
Agencies or organizations can just act like a rogue faction and do just whatever they want. No matter what their own rules say, they will circumvent their own rules even.
After the Office of Special Counsel kicked in, the VA scrapped the plan to fire Thompson and transferred him back to the kitchen and agreed to pay him damages. You might expect the story to end there, but Troy Thompson reached out to me to say they're retaliating and punishing him yet again, and he'll share the details when they resolve his complaint.
It's pick and choose. You know, if you're with me, then I cover for you and it gets swept under the rug. If you're not with me, then you have to deal with their vengeance and their unfairness and their disparate treatment.
Coming up, we'll show you what vets say has changed for the better and what the VA says it should change next. Well, veterans have not received some of the help they need because of Congress. For years, we've shown you how Congress denied in vitro fertilization benefits for wounded vets. And now Marissa Lynn shows us how they took action after our investigation.
It's just absolutely unbelievable to see them together. When I'm looking at him, and he is what we were working for. I mean, he is everything that we hoped
Far
for.
exceeded what my expectations.
Alex and Holly Dillman's 7-month-old son, Maximus, is the light of their life.
It's a miracle how it all comes together.
Yeah.
But 2 years ago, they didn't know if this day would ever come.
You know, it's really heartbreaking because it is really hard to not know if we're going to be parents.
A retired Army Staff Sergeant, Dillman suffered life-changing injuries while deployed in Afghanistan 6 years ago.
After injury, you're not really in a place to bring, you know, it's difficult.
Until recently, the Department of Veterans Affairs didn't cover the cost for combat wounded veterans for in vitro fertilization. Last year, former President Obama signed a bill that allows the VA to pay the costs. However, it will have to be revisited every 2 years for now.
I mean, these are services that make these men and women whole again.
The Dillmans went through 3 rounds of IVF before having their baby boy.
I don't know what's after this now. I mean, this is really the American dream.
Now they want to see a permanent solution so other families like them can also live out the American dream.
It shouldn't be any different for the men and women, you know, who serve our country, who have risked life and limb. They need to know they're going to be able to have access to this treatment.
Maximus keeps the Dillmans busy these days. His life is the most precious gift of their lives after the amount of suffering and struggling they went through to have him here today.
This is what it's about. Seeing the smile on your face and the sparkle in his eyes. I mean, seeing him talk about Maximus this way, this is what it's all about.
Congress passed these changes as a temporary fix. It allows the VA to pay for in vitro fertilization and adoption fees for the next 2 years. They're still working on making it permanent. Coming up, VA Secretary David Shulkin spells out his plan to change and fix the VA. Back in May, VA Secretary David Shulkin said the department is in critical condition, and he identified 13 areas that he says need to change. He's asked Congress to give the VA more power to punish bad employees. And Shulkin also said he wants to expand the Veterans Choice Program so more vets can go to private doctors and hospitals.
The problems in VA are not largely going to be solved through additional money. These are going to be solved through management practices, focus, and some legislative changes.
Please check out our YouTube channel for a closer look at the changes, the proposed changes, where they stand, and what they could cost. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe. Thank you for watching our continuing investigation of forgotten heroes and the war at home.